Welcome back to Tao of Twang. I'm Dave. We're going to have some fun with this rock progression. It's a very familiar sequence of chords in a lot of classic rock songs, and all along the Watchtower being probably the most iconic one. Um, it's a little bit slower than versions of that song that you hear normally, but that's to give us room to get in here and really take care with what we're doing and try out some new concepts for you, hopefully. So did a lesson a couple of days ago on YouTube using this backing track. And when I do them on YouTube, sometimes I'll put a separate backing track up, but usually just at the end of the video I'll put a minute or two of the practice loop for everybody on there. One of the cool things about Patreon is you can upload as an attachment, as I will for this one. So right below here, there'll be a file that you can do whatever you want with it, right? It's an MP3 or a WAV file or whatever. You can, keep it, store it, use it whenever you want, put it in your Apple Music. That's what I do. When I click on through that folder of backing tracks, they just pop up through that Apple player. And that's really cool. Sometimes I just let them go one after another. I don't even know which one's going to pop up next, right? It's potpourri or whatever, Like I'm going to mix a Lydia and it's like, oh, here's a Dorian one. I'll just hang out for another, half an hour or whatever. So want to get you some, nice lengths on those so you don't have to back them up all the time and stuff. And then today we'll have a little bit of tab. Not really licks. It's just kind of some sequence of these triads that we're going to talk about today. And it's more of a, kind of side work, I guess, to do. But once you, really spend some time on them and I'll get you going and then you will explore, other areas of the neck using the same kind of approach. And I really encourage you to spend time doing that. That's a big part of what I do and how I teach myself and my style. So we're going to get going here in just a second. Let me pause real briefly before we get going to thank everybody that's supporting us on here. It just means so much to me and my wife. Every week we get more people joining, and I'm not the greatest self promoter, so like if I forget to say something in the YouTube videos, we'll have kind of a plateau for a couple of weeks, and then I'll remind myself to mention it and talk about it a little bit in the YouTube videos, and sure enough, every time I do that, a couple more people sign up or whatever. So just really appreciate you. I hope you're finding useful and fun stuff on here, and we're glad to have you, and we're just going to keep going with it. Now, our backing track on this, let's just put it on real quick, just to see what chords we're using and what kind of triads we're going to get into here. There we go. It's a little slower than a lot of the popular versions of like Watchtower, right? But that's so that we have room to, pay attention to what we're doing and try out some new stuff, So let's leave it on for just a second. The chords, of course, are. Okay, so A minor pentatonic. Get warmed up a little bit. Not a whole lot new right there. If you're, depending on where you're at with everything and you're still, when you mention minor pentatonic, you're not talking about something that's like something you're going to do in some stage of playing and then later on you're going to advance to some other scales or something, whatever. That's always going to be a big part of the game. So, don't underestimate that, especially on something like this tune. If that's all you used in terms of note, uh, uh, um, you know, material scales, that would be absolutely sufficient. And most of the popular stuff that you hear using these chords, over the decades, honestly, is 90% minor pentatonic. But I do think that you can add a little dimension to it and a little twang, if you will, method to it if you work out a little bit on some of the triads, right? And the obvious one, of course, would be, things centered around that A minor. Okay. And I'm going to put some diagrams up here in just a second. And this is more of like a kind of, I wouldn't just put the backing track on and try to like just kind of go right after this stuff, And I know sometimes on YouTube they'll in the while you're listening to the backing track, they'll show those diagrams and maps of all the different notes and things, and that's cool. It's really helpful, but it also I think sort of sometimes gives us this thought or reaction like, oh, I should just try to cover all these notes and just kind of run around and stare at that diagram. That's that that I would be, if that's working and you're getting the results that you want from that, great. But I would be a little bit skeptical of that just as sort of a main way of learning your way around. Okay. And part of that is because let's say we take some of those three triads and we don't even really worry about if we're playing exactly how the song goes, right? We just got those three chords. A minor, G, and F. So here's an A minor. I'll put it up here for you too. Okay. And I didn't do any kind of up and back and different, kind of cadences and things in it. I just kind of drew them on there. Right? That's going to a G, right? So that's right. And you could do the analysis as you go if you want to do a little extra kind of, a chord tone training and identification as you go. A, the root, C, the minor third, and E, the fifth. And that one goes right up, root third, fifth. This one's root for the G, down to the fifth, and then the third B, right? Then if I played an F, that's another one that goes right on up. Root third, fifth is the major third for the F, F, A, C. Now, A minor, if that's our kind of diatonic key or the relative major is C, we don't have any sharps or flats in that key, right? So that's kind of cool. That's another nice thing about this. You can really, kind of get used to that 7-note, sequence in kind of the most easily organized key, I guess, to think of. Just the white keys on the piano. And then, of course, the pentatonic is 5 notes selected from those 7. We'll talk about that in just a second here. So, right, that's if I went through all the chords the way they go. Ba, ba, da, ba, 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 bum, da, da, bum, bum. Okay. Now, when you play the song, that G doesn't get as much time value. It's more like. I mentioned this in the YouTube video. When I think of this tune and others like it, using this progression, I think of it more as I focus it more on the A minor and the F, right? And so I don't always throw the G out, but I don't worry about, trying to address it every time either, right? And remember, we're going to, in here in a minute, we're going to put this all kind of back into the mix with a minor pentatonic or blues scale type of shapes, right? And just right away, since we're up here, you can see that one of those is, Sometimes I try to slow it down to a certain point and just kind of start missing the notes, right? The opposite of what you would think would happen. But you recognize, that sound and those shapes, right? So in each one of these areas that you're working and exploring, you know, uh, uh, go through the triads and then kind of say like, well, what are my A minor pentatonic notes right there in that neighborhood? And that's where you don't really have to have like a written out set of licks for this process to actually emerge for the result. The natural thing that's going to happen is they're going to start to mingle. Okay? Don't worry about it. There is no right or wrong version of that, right? And like I said, don't worry about the tempo and the click and the backing track and all that at first. Let your ear relax and immerse yourself in just the relationship of those three chords, and the way that they're related is so musical. It's so cool. Even if you don't get to the backing track at all, you're going to start to latch onto a certain uh, um, sensibility about how these chords are interrelated by doing this process that I'm describing, not by copying exactly what I just did. Okay? So now if I go down to here, let's say we went. There's another little neighborhood, right? Now that one's kind of right in the heart of the matter. Okay, so then I kind of brought it back up to like I'd already done a little work up here, and I was getting familiar with it, getting it under my fingers. I wasn't having to think about it so much. I'm not looking at the tab for that one anymore because I spent 2 or 3 minutes really kind of wandering around with that. Then I get down here, look at the tab, I learn that new one, and I integrate it. Right? It's like a snowball. You got to, you roll it around, and you roll it around some more, and you roll it around some more, and it's picking up new stuff out on the surface. But the core of it's the same. It's all building off of that, right? So these kinds of exercises and this method use teaching, methods and theories based on those kinds of models. Okay, so you keep doubling back, keep adding, roll it around the yard. It gets bigger and bigger, right? Then there's another, I think one more oct. I think it's a duplicate of this sound. Let's check that. Yeah, that's just the same melody and sequences of notes in a lower octave than that first one that we did, and I wrote that one out there for you too. So that's the extent. And there's a PDF document there down below that has that on it if you want to pull it out separately. So spend some time on that. And then when we come back here in just a second, I got to start my sequencer over. We'll do a little jamming and start really weaving that, mingling in with the pentatonic and the rock stuff. All right. So now let's put this backing track on and just, take it easy with the speed here at first. And just, I'm going to kind of, go back to my just, and you will be using your, just sort of style of using, the blues scale and so forth. And then we'll start to see if we can sneak a little bit of that in, of that those chord tones. And then we're going to take a look at how when we add in when we combine all the notes from those triads, we end up with a 7-note scale. I mentioned it earlier, but I want to go back and kind of, mortar that in, how this all fits together. You'll see in just a second. But right now, just kind of get loosened up again with the pentatonic stuff. Now, I went ahead and demonstrated a little bit, and I did it slowly, of some of that stuff that I did in the intro at the beginning of this lesson with those, 2-note harmonies. And we're going to look at that briefly, the last thing here, and how those are really, pieces of these other little triad shapes, okay? It's just taking 2 notes out of it on adjacent strings instead of like a 3-note configuration, which many of them often are, the triads. So we got now, that's not in the pentatonic, but let's look at when we go back and look at these 3 triads that we've been dealing with here now. Let's take let's do it up here. Here's an A minor. Now, all those notes are in that minor pentatonic scale. Okay, so that one is just made of the same stuff. There's no, you can't go wrong with that, right? Now, when we go to the G, let's just use that G, part of that shape of G, but we're just using so we got A minor. Okay, now, a couple of those notes are in that minor pentatonic. The G was the flat 7 of A, that's in minor pentatonic. And that D is in there, right? So the 5th of the G it's actually the what's that? The 4th in the if you look at it in the A natural minor, right? Don't worry about that so much. The important part is that these 2 notes are in it. Well, that B, that 3rd of the G, is not in that pentatonic. But that's a note that we definitely want, and not just with the G. It's the 9th for the A, and it has other extended relationships to the other triads. But for the sake of kind of building this little theory part, we'll say that that's the 3rd of the G. So that gets added in there. And then if we go down to F, just keep using these simple shapes. Okay, so that's that little D shape but it's F up here. And that note's in A minor pentatonic, it's A, right? That's the 3rd of the F major triad. That's the root F, that's not in there. Okay, and then that C, the 5th of the F major, is the minor 3rd in the A minor. So now, don't get caught up in that in any way that distracts you from the simple program that we're using today. But if that makes sense and that helps you in your overall understanding of things, great. So what happens if I take that minor pentatonic, and I add those two notes into it. The B and the F were the two that were outside of that, but I stick them in there. Right? And I framed it from A to A so that by definition that would be the A natural minor. Same notes as C major. So a lot of those two note things I was doing, you could look at them as being a harmonized version of the C major scale or the A natural minor, right? So now when you look at those two notes, you see like, well, depends on how you want to label that. Look, it could be in different contexts. There's a couple notes out of the blues scale, the A minor pentatonic, right? If I play them together, it's a little two note chord, and it's part of an F. Isn't that cool? So it's F A C, but just those two out of it. It's also part of an A minor triad, right? So you see how the versatility of all this, and I'm just gonna. I always make mistakes when I do this two note stuff because I don't practice it enough. I don't. I'll sneak it in there, but sometimes if I try to push it too far, eventually I'll play the wrong little shape or something. And it's cool because when you use it in two adjacent strings and sets of two adjacent strings like this, you get an alternating, usually in most cases. There's a few exceptions of the same shape. It's one or the other of two shapes. So you end up with a okay. So see, I got kind of lucky there, didn't I? Okay. So thanks for your patience on that. Sometimes these end up being a little bit longer than I mean for them to be, but that's all really interrelated stuff. And if we try to just present it like, just do these shapes and so forth, that's cool. It works. You could use that. But when you do take the time, and we do take the time together to see how all of this stuff really relates, I think it gives you a better chance of just kind of discovering your own connections and really putting something together that works in your understanding. And it also tends to rely and benefit more from the things that you're already doing, right? It's not as redundant. It's not like just do this and then tomorrow watch another video and do something else. It's all integrated, right? This progression is a great example of that. And rather than do a lot more demonstration here of things and you watching me play, I'm going to go ahead and get you to the practice loop here, and use that tab. But remember, work off to the side and really get those triads moving around, then go back. You start playing your, kind of, Stairway to Heaven, field down there or whatever. You're just gonna almost, stumble into more of those nice notes. Okay, and don't be afraid to just kind of use the entire scale of the minor, the 7-note minor scale also. pentatonic and blues scale. Okay, thanks again. Let me know how this goes. See you next week.